College Piano Department, a subsidiary of the Hunter College Music Department, and our celebration of Beethoven's 250th birthday. This is the culmination of a long year in more ways than one. Yes, Beethoven was born 250 years ago, and yes, Beethoven is, if you will, a great symbol of an indomitable spirit, someone overcoming lots of physical and medical hardship to an emotional hardship to create utterly great works of art that endure today at the center of the canon. And the gifts that he's given to us pianists are plentiful and never ending in terms of their surprises, their depth, and what we learn from them anew every time we encounter them. So we're going to present to you today 2 live performances and 4 video premieres of movements of sonatas that were recorded and uploaded this week by our students. The live performances are going to be by myself, and to start off with, Karen Xie, wonderful piano major, who's going to give us the first movement of Beethoven's Sonata in D minor, Opus 31, number 2. So that's the official title of the piece. It's also been affixed with the title Tempest. That is a title, like so many of Beethoven's titles, that was not bestowed to the sonata by Beethoven. It comes from a friend of Beethoven's, Anton Schindler, who said that in conversation with Beethoven through his conversation books, that when he asked, how should I understand what this D minor sonata is about, and also what the Appassionata sonata is about, and Beethoven replied, just read Shakespeare's Tempest. So he publicized it with that name, but that was not Beethoven's intention. Anyway, this begins with, this has a lot of mercurial moods in it, and begins with some mysterious recitatives that keep appearing throughout the piece, interspersed with a driving, stormy music. So without further ado, I want to welcome Karen to perform the first movement of Beethoven's Sonata in D minor, Opus 31, number 2, for us. Take it away, Karen. All right. Brava, brava, Karen. A beautiful, stirring performance. Wonderful contrasts between the mysterious recitative sections and the driving energy, rhythmic spirit of the principal material in this movement. Well, very well done. Thank you so much for this. So, when I was thinking about how to celebrate Beethoven's 250th birthday, I was in particular interested in trying to perform some pieces that are lesser known of Beethoven. Now, it's difficult to find solo piano pieces of Beethoven that are, one might describe as underplayed, but I believe I have one for you today, and I think it's inexplicably underplayed. It is the Opus 77 Fantasia. It's a solo piece. It's the only completely solo piano piece that he bestowed with that title in and of itself. We do have the earlier sonatas that are marked quasi una fantasia, that are also principally titled sonatas, the Opus 27. And we have the choral fantasy, which is opens with a big piano cadenza, but then is a piece for piano solo and chorus. But this is the only solo piece. We believe that it has its origins in this massive academy, this big self-promotional concert that Beethoven put on that took hours and hours and included the premieres of the Fifth and Sixth Symphonies, the Fourth Piano Concerto, and I believe the Choral Fantasy as well. We know that Beethoven also did a big solo piano improvisation during this, and there are some sources suggest that the origins of this material reside in that concert. So what makes it fantasy-like? Well, the opening of this piece seemingly has lots of completely disjointed material. It mercurially moves from key to key. There seem to be no theme relationships. It's just kind of wild. And then for the second half of the piece, it's a single movement work. He settles into a theme and variations that's actually really quite structured. And that seems curious, perhaps, for a piece called Fantasia or Fantasy. But we also know, that it was quite a popular format for keyboardists to use the theme and variation structure to improvise. They would be given a theme sometimes at a party and say, okay, improvise a set of variations on this theme. So that kind of makes sense. So here is Beethoven's Fantasy Opus 77. I'm going to switch cameras and to my piano mic, so just bear with me a moment. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you. That was a great pleasure to play for you all. Such a really an underrated work. It's very quirky. It starts in G minor and ends in B major. It gloriously makes no sense, but there's so many wonderful and compelling mood swings and material in the piece. Really ingeniously worked out. So now we move on to our video premieres. We have 4 today, and we're going to start off with Catherine Langevin-Falcon performing an early sonata from Opus 2. These are the first 3 sonatas that Beethoven wrote were in Opus 2. So this is the third piece and the longest by far of the 3 in C major. This sonata is about 25 minutes long. I believe it's the second longest sonata of any of the early period sonatas, eclipsed only by the so-called Grand Sonata, Opus 7 in E flat, which is next. But this is sort of a grand sonata too. It has this very grand structure to it. It almost seems like really a working out for a symphonic movement more than anything else. And it's very difficult with so many different technical challenges, double notes, octaves, parallel sixths, and so forth. So it's a big undertaking, one of the more difficult sonatas, I think. And Catherine is really commended to taking it on and playing it with such verve and dynamicism. So I'm going to share my screen now, and we will hear the video premiere of Catherine Langevin-Falcon playing the first movement of the Sonata in C major, Opus 2, number 3. Bravissima, Catherine. And it's a very epic movement. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Lots of bravura playing, incisive playing. I could really hear the symphonic orchestra transcription begging to come out of that piece. So we move on now to a movement of another sonata that could also be dubbed a grand sonata. This is the fourth movement, the final movement of the Sonata in B flat, Opus 22, which was written in 1800. And this piece is really a fantastic piece and not so often played, unfortunately, compared with so many of the other sonatas. It has a lot of bravura writing in it, a wealth of variety. Right now we have Sarah Sebaoun, who recorded the final movement of this sonata, the Allegretto Rondo movement. And again, there's just an incredible amount of variety in this movement. It's extremely difficult, unpredictable in terms of what paths it's going to take musically, texturally, harmonically, and otherwise. So bravo in advance, Sarah, and I'll share my screen again, and maybe we'll hear the video premiere of the final movement of Sonata in B flat, Opus 22, played by Sarah Sebaoun. Okay, brava, brava, Sarah. Sorry, the ring got cut off there just at the last minute. I'm not quite sure why, but so your last chord was just a little bit dry, but no matter at all. It was just a superb, wonderful performance. So much variety, so many different colors, and rhythmic shapes and different kinds of phrases that you produced. You really differentiated the sections of this amazingly contrasting movement so well. So just give me a moment here to do some housekeeping. Okay. So we're about to proceed to our next performer, Tess Loucka, who will be performing the first movement of the Piano Sonata number 15 in D major, opus 28. And this one, like the Tempest, also has a nickname, and like the Tempest, it was not given the nickname by Beethoven. So this sonata in D major is given the subtitle Pastoral by a couple of publishers. And in this case, it seems really valid to bestow it with that title. There are very open voicings, chord voicings in it. It has a very spacious feel to it because of all of the musical parameters that Beethoven is exploiting here. We start, in fact, with a low drone on D that's almost like a bagpipe or a kind of folk instrument, and a melody unfolding very slowly on top of it that includes horn fifths and all of these sort of pastoral elements in the writing. It's really an incredible sonata, and this is a sonata that I think is not played often enough at all. So, Tess, thank you so much for giving us the gift of a performance of this piece today, of the first movement of this sonata. So without further ado, I will again share my screen, and we will hear Tess Loucka play the first movement of Beethoven's Sonata, opus 28, popularly known as the Pastoral. Right. Brava, Tess, and you are actually with us on Zoom. Take a bow. Go ahead, take a real bow. At least nod your head. Thank you. That's awesome to see. Great. Yes, so wonderful, beautiful performance. I love the color. I love the way that you are using the color of the instrument to really, again, suggest an orchestration with this, because this is sort of also an orchestral piece in the guise of a piano sonata. And just a really wonderful performance. Thank you so much. So we conclude, let's give me a moment here. Let's do some housekeeping. We conclude, we've been going with the videos in chronological order with the 4 videos here. So the final one in that order is the final piece in our program, which is going to be played by Sabina Marra. And it is the 32 variations in C minor without opus 80. That's written out woo without opus 80. So Beethoven did not see fit to assign an opus number for this piece, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But yes, even though it's 32 variations in C minor, it sounds like a massive piece, like it's Goldberg variation length, except it isn't. It's continuous variations, and the variations sort of tumble one after another in a way, and so the entire length of the piece is between 11 and 12 minutes. It is maybe up to around 13 minutes, depending on how people play it. But it is really kind of astounding piece, very different in Beethoven's catalog. He uses a lot of Baroque elements in it. There's a descending chromatic bass line that makes it sound sort of like a Baroque passacaglia or chaconne via the chord progression, and as well as the continuous variation structure. So he's clearly influenced by Baroque forms in this. And it's a nice angry piece. It's in the key of C minor, right? Beethoven's heroic key. And again, has a wealth of variety and difficulties in it. It's a great display piece, very powerful. And yet he gave it no opus number, really not quite sure why, except that there was a conversation we have recorded where Beethoven, the writer, claimed that Beethoven was hearing the piece being played by someone, and he said, "What is that piece?" And he said, "Oh, you wrote this, Master. It's the 32 variations in C minor." And he said, "I wrote that," and he basically dissed himself and made some self-deprecating comments about what an ass he was for the way that he composed in those days. But the piece was premiered in his lifetime in 1807 and actually got very good reviews in prominent journals and magazines and so forth. So here's our final performance, and then I will be back to recap afterwards. Our final performance by Sabina Marra of Beethoven's 32 variations in C minor, Ona opus or without opus number 80. All right. Yes. Brava, brava, brava. Brava, Sabina. Bravissima. Wonderful performance. It's a very difficult work and demands a lot of stamina, mental and physical stamina too. There's some taxing passages. It's very mercurial. It's an excellent virtuosic workout, and every variation is ingenious, and you, I think, conveyed the personality of each of these variations very beautifully and very vividly. So thank you so much. And thank you all so much for joining us today. We have, as the concert transpired, there were between 20 and 30 listeners on YouTube Live. So I know a fair amount of you are out there. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you again to all the marvelous performers. You are great inspirations to me and my colleagues, and thank you for sharing those gifts with us. Once again, I'm Geoffrey Burleson, Director of Piano Studies in the Hunter College Music Department. Thank you all once again for coming and experiencing this together. Please stay safe, stay healthy, stay reasonably fulfilled, stay warm this winter. Stay sensible. I will try to do that as well. We have to tough it out a little while longer, but when spring and the imagery of the Pastoral Sonata starts coming to the forefront once again, there will be that same sense of hope and renewal on the horizon, I hope, and I have to believe that. So thank you all once again for coming. There are other marvelous events happening in the Hunter College Music Department with all of the final concerts coming up. There is a collaborative piano and art song recital featuring many of the performers that you heard today. That's happening on Tuesday, December 8th at 4 p.m. and many others as well. If you just go to the Hunter College Music Department YouTube channel, you will find when all of these events happen and when the live streams will start. And if you miss them, they're all archived a couple of days later. So thank you so much once again, and be well, and bravi to everyone, and I'll see you around.